John Murillo's first poetry collection, Up Jumped the Boogie, was a finalist for both the 2011 Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Penn Open Book Award, and was named by the Huffington Post as one of the 10 recent books of poetry you should read right now. And it still is one of the books of poetry you should read right now. A graduate of New York University's MFA program in creative writing, his other honors include a Pushcart Prize, 2 Larry Neal Writers Awards, and fellowships from the Breadloaf Writers Conference, Cave Canem Foundation, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Massachusetts, the New York Times, and the Wisconsin Institute of Creative Writing. His work has appeared in such publications as Callaloo, Court Green, Ninth Letter, and Plowshares, and is forthcoming in Angles of Ascent, a Norton anthology of African American poetry. And we just heard that John's second book of poems is under contract, so be on the lookout for that. His choreo play, Trigger, was commissioned by Edgeworks Dance Theater and premiered in spring 2011. And I'll just say a few words about John's poems, really very few, because we're here for John. In one of his Magic City poems, Yusuf Komanyaka says, "We were born between oh yeah and God damn it." John Murillo's poems are firmly rooted in the space Komanyaka describes, between urban grit, blood and flesh, the threadbare and fraught, and what Lorca called duende, the divine energy that stirs and deepens all created things. I want to just read the final lines to one of the many poems I fell in love with when I read John's book. The title of this poem is Murillo. This finger is a poem, wrinkled, scarred, and dirty under the nail, but never mind the grime, motherfuck my cuticles. You big dummy, don't look at my finger, I'm trying to show you the moon. John Murillo has said that poetry has the ability to make us more human, and I think this is one of those poems that does it, in that, there's that scarred, wrinkled finger and the messed up cuticles, which are trying to get us beyond the body into the great world that the moon represents. So when we experience his artistry and elegance, the ferocity of his works, that word is one that Junot Diaz said when he described John's poems, I really do feel they make us more human. Oh yeah. So let's welcome John Murillo.
God damn. How you guys doing? All right. I was going to start with a poem before I even said hello to anybody. It's something I'm trying out now. It's real dramatic. I just get up here and read a poem, then I say hello. But I wanted to acknowledge that introduction. That was great. I love that. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you, Ethan, Claire, and everyone here for having me. How you guys feeling? Good. You good? All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read a few poems from the forthcoming manuscript, and also a few poems from the book. And afterwards, I think we'll have some Q&A, yeah? And then after that, if you guys haven't already, there's a really nice spread back there. So make sure you get some of that, and don't be shy about it. Take some home, save it. Late night snack. Tonight, the Clippers play the Sacramento Kings on ESPN, so you should go watch that, eat some snacks, and root against the Clippers, because they suck. All right. So I'm going to change things up from what I had planned. I'm actually going to start with this poem in honor of our Iron poet, Isabella. Thank you. Where are you? There you go. That was beautiful. Thank you. This poem, let's see, what do you need to know about it? So I used to be a personal trainer back in the day. You won't know it by looking at me. But I used to be like mad swole and like ripped and stuff. And that was years ago. And then this summer I went on a very strict beer diet. Every day I had at least one beer. Yeah. And so my wife would kind of getting on me. And so I'm back in the gym now. And this poem it's about, well, it involves weightlifting. And there's a prayer in here to an Orisha named Ogun. Orisha is something like a saint in the Yoruba pantheon, and he's the pretty much the deity associated with iron, right? So I say a prayer to him in here, and I think that's all you need to know. Also, trigger warning, there's some strong language in here as well. But you opened up with motherfuckers, so that was good. So it gave me permission. It's called Poem Ending and Beginning on Lines by Larry Levis. Because you haven't praised anything in months, and because iron, because 2 10-pound plates, when pressed to 6 wheels and late sets, are enough to drive better men to dust, and because the young bucks curling near the mirror have paused their pretty work to watch your old ass snatched from the bench's buckling uprights, all 335 goddamn pounds, you summon the saint of iron, the blacksmith in palm skirt fisting his machetes to give you just a little bit of what you need to bring it down, to bang it up, just once, just this once. Ago baba mi, ogun owanileo, ogun kobu kobu. Of course, the young bucks chuckle at this ugga booga babble. This strange ritual gibberish of an old-timer, obviously in the parlance of the place, dead set to fuck himself up. But you break the weight, you do, and the room falls quiet but for the quiver and clang of iron on iron, the few slim seconds it takes to turn back time. Lift off, and you're a young man in an old city. No beard, no gray. Lift again, and Parliament is pulsing from a ghetto blaster perched on a pair of milk crates in a neighbor's yellow yard. Your 16-year-old self is writhing under another bar. What feels like 2 tons crushing you dead, and Robert Caldwell's glaring from behind the bench, yelling for you to drive it all up. Robert Caldwell, barrel-chested, chiseled, and damn near 300 pounds, who pushed a pallet jack for 12-hour shifts after 20-something years stretched across San Quentin, Soledad, and Folsom. Robert Caldwell, the triple OG, who once threatened his boss with a box cutter for woofing loud or holding eye contact a little too long, has, for reasons unknown, chosen you for his pet project, promising to forge you into something unbreakable. Said by summer's end, you too will have grown men flinching when you flex, and the women, oh, the women, will make disappear all the deep, deep ache a man inflicts on himself. Or, rather, all the pain Robert Caldwell will inflict on you. For make no mistake, this will be a summer that hurts. Deadlifts, box squats, power cleans, and curls, the egg yolks nasty, the slither down your throat, drop sets, pyramids, 21s, and cheats, the day you learn how Robert Caldwell found his father dead. Days dead, the day before, a stolen desert eagle spent and sprawled near what once was a face. Robert Caldwell drops this on you hard between sets, but doesn't pause to break down sobbing. Push, brother, push, says Robert Caldwell. Pain is weakness leaving. Push, brother, push. Become something unbreakable. Robert Caldwell doesn't break, or take a day to mourn, or ring your phone late night to chat about regret, or counsel you to love better than you've been. He does what any good iron worker does. He works, and he works you all summer long, sets and reps and pressure and flame and all the requisite ache. You don't break exactly, but come close to buckling. That summer and summers since, so much burn, so much weight, so much. You'll leave 3 women, the rest will leave you first. You'll bury your own father, lose 4 friends to gunfire, 1 to a jailhouse noose. Your hands will shame you often. But first, this. O.G. Robert Caldwell, glaring down and yelling. O.G. Robert Caldwell, backlit by the sun. Ogun, Owanileyo, Ogun, Kobu, Kobu, how beautiful this man, his trust in iron, what it gives us, what it takes, what it gives again. He yells for you to push, you push. Robert Caldwell, you think, would have loved this beat-down Brooklyn hole in the wall, its ripped leather seat backs, all its stale air. He'd have loved the rusty dumbbells, the dirt-caked mirror, the young bucks circling you now, watching and waiting. You stare hard into that mirror, into your beard and gray, crow's feet and furrows, 30-something summers, and you've become the triple OG. Every ache you've earned tells you so. The young bucks clock you as you lay back on the bench, your hands chalked and finding their grip. Wait, you think? They don't have a clue. You break the bar from its rack, feel it all bearing down, the quiver and heft, the sudden overcast quiet of the past tense. Thank you. So I mentioned in that poem, losing a friend to a jailhouse noose. And it's the second time I did this today. I gave away the ending of this next poem. Let's see. We might get to this question later on in the Q&A about my coming to poetry, but I'll just give you a little preview. I came to poetry as a rapper 34 years ago now. I was 11 years old, and I wasn't very good when I started, actually. But I got pretty good, and when I was 17, we started going to the studio, recording demos, and getting play on some local radio stations in LA. This poem takes place during the summer of our first demos. It's called 1989. There are no windows here, and the walls are lined with egg cartons. So if we listen past the sampled piano, drum kick and speaker box rumble, we'd still not hear the robins celebrating daybreak. The engineer worries the mixboard, something about a hiss lurking between notes. Dollar Bill curses the engineer, time we don't have, says it's just a demo and doesn't need perfecting. Fools always want to make like Quincy Jones when you pay him by the hour. DJ Eddie Scissorhands, because he cuts so nice, taps ashes into an empty pizza box, head nodding to his latest masterpiece, Beethoven spliced with Mingus, mixed with Frankie Beverly, all laid on Billy Squire's big beat. I'm in a corner, crossing out and rewriting lines I'll want to forget years later, looking up every now and then to watch Shakespeare, Pomona's finest MC, in the vocal booth, spitting rhymes he never bothers putting to paper, nearly hypnotized by the gold-plated cross swinging from his neck, as he too will swing, days from now, before they cut him from the rafters of a jail cell. So that was a friend of mine who, he was my DJ. So actually, I put him in the poem as the MC, but I was the MC, he was the DJ. And we kind of went our separate ways. I was telling someone the story the other day where he started hanging around. So this is the mid-90s. We're coming out of the 80s in LA. So gang culture was at its height. You guys may have seen the movie Straight Outta Compton, yeah? So those of us who at the time were trying to rap, there was NWA, and that whole genre was a very heavy influence on us. So much so that my friend actually got caught up in what they were singing about, rapping about, more so than the music, right? I wanted to tell his story partially because part of my job, I think, as a poet is to witness and to share the stories of people who don't really have opportunities to share their own, right? So what I did in the book was to, I guess, kind of fictionalize my friend and made an amalgam of different characters, and I made them into somebody named JoJo. This next poem is in the voice of JoJo. It's a persona piece, and it's a form called the ghazal, which is a Persian form. The poem is called Hustle. See what I did there? Slick, right? And see, and I'm gonna not cuss in this poem. Let's see, and it starts with the epigraph from Rakim. Thinking of a master plan, 'cause ain't nothing but sweat inside my hand. Got drive enough to grab the moon with these hands, these hard-working, snatch opportunity hands. Left solar dad broke, made my first 30 G's. That was September, now it's June, with these hands. I serve mama for free, keep her off these streets, off her knees, out of motel rooms with these hands. My baby girl asked me, Daddy, what's turn tricks? Got to pull us up out of here soon with these hands. A man ain't a man if he can't feed himself. I'm carving steaks each afternoon with these hands. I hear minimum wage is about $6. What I look like pushing a broom with these hands. Read a book in my cell, said I was the one, built pyramids, temples, and tombs with these hands. At 10, I was a lookout, then learned to bag, how to cook up rocks in a spoon with these hands. Lost a good woman, said the life was too much. Some nights I still smell her perfume on these hands. No way to know, but maybe Daddy sang blues. Blood explains the itch of his tune in these hands. You guys good? Yeah. All right. Let's see. I was talking with a group of students earlier today. A young man read a poem before I got a chance to get up and read. And in the poem, he mentioned something about the Black Lives Matter movement and the answer, which is the All Lives Matter movement. And led me to think about the Blue Lives Matter movement, right? And which led me to this other poem that I printed out and I want to read by Sterling Brown. If you guys don't know, you got to check him out. He's probably, some would say, and might be able to make a good case, and I wouldn't disagree, that he's probably the best African-American poet to have ever done it. He was writing like in the 30s, 40s, 50s, yeah. He had a long career. This poem is about 50 years old. It's called Southern Cop. And it kind of reminds me of the Blue Lives Matter movement in that, what about the police? What about them and then their trauma? Yeah. He predicted this, wrote this poem. Let us forgive Ty Kendricks. The place was Darktown. He was young. His nerves were jittery. The day was hot. The Negro ran out of the alley, and so Ty shot. Let us understand Ty Kendricks. The Negro must have been dangerous because he ran. And here was a rookie with a chance to prove himself a man. Let us condone Ty Kendricks if we cannot decorate. When he found what the Negro was running for, it was too late. And all we can say for the Negro is, it was unfortunate. Let us pity Ty Kendricks. He has been through enough. Standing there, his big gun smoking, rabbit scared, alone, having to hear the winches wail and the dying Negro moan. So this poem, it's called Into the Dragon. And it takes its title from a film that if you haven't seen, you should see. Classic cinema, it's Bruce Lee, yeah? My favorite scene in the movie had nothing to do with Bruce Lee, actually. There's another martial artist named Jim Kelly who was in the movie. African-American, 1976, right? We didn't have a whole lot of positive role models, you know, like Tyler Perry and Kanye West or so. Just joking. Just joking. But, you know, our role models are few and far between, actually. And this guy, beautiful, beautiful man, perfectly round afro, like built karate man, right? Movie star. So this scene in the movie, he gets pulled over by some policemen, and he jumps out and like beats them all down and drives off in the police car. I thought that was cool. So the image stayed with me for years, and I wrote this poem. It's called Into the Dragon. It takes place in LA in 1976. For me, the movie starts with a black man leaping into an orbit of badges. Tiny moons catching the sheen of his perfect black afro. Arc kicks, karate chops, and 30 cops on their backs. It starts with a swagger, the cool lean into the leather front seats of the black and white he takes off in. Deep hallelujahs of moviegoers drowning out the wah-wah guitar. Salt and butter high fives, right on, brother. And daddy, glowing so bright, he can light the screen all by himself. This is how it goes down. Friday night, and my father drives us home from the late show. Two heroes Cadillacing across King Boulevard. In the car's dark cab, we jab and clutch Jim Kelly and Bruce Lee with popcorn breath, and almost miss the lights flashing in the cracked side mirror. I know what's under the seat, but when the uniforms approach from the rear quarter panel, when the fat one leans so far into my father's window, I can smell his long day's work. When my father, this John Henry of a man, hides his hammer, doesn't buck, tucks away his baritone, license and registration, shaking as if showing a bathroom pass to a grade school principal. I learn the difference between cinema and city, between the movie house cheers of old men and the silence that gets us home. And this poem reminds me of another poem that's not mine, by Lucille Clifton, who, some would argue, and I wouldn't argue against him, is the greatest African-American poet to ever done it. It's a short poem. It's called Why Some People Be Mad at Me Sometimes. They ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories. And I keep on remembering mine. Now, hopefully, you guys will go home and forget which poems are whose. You'll be like, yo, he's so great. He has this poem called Why People Be Mad at Me Sometimes. Southern Cop. So I started out, again, as a rapper. And, it's funny because I didn't really appreciate my training. What I mean by that is I came to poetry pretty late in life. I was almost 30 when I started really writing and studying and taking myself seriously as a poet. But I had been engaged with hip hop for, at that point, nearly 2 decades, right? And it wasn't until even after that where I fully appreciated what it gave me, not just as an artist, but just culturally. One thing that it did, it kind of helped to build a bridge across generations between my father and myself, right? The guy I told you about in the poem, my DJ, I would actually go in my father's record collection and swipe records, take it to my friend's house, and he'd cut them up, scratch them, mix them, yeah? And we made music. And I'd play it for my father, and then, we could have the conversation about, the songs that he heard when he was my age and all this and that. So in that way, it kind of helped to form some bridges in our lives. This poem is, I guess, a dedication to that experience. It's called Ode to the Crossfader. And a crossfader, who knows what a crossfader is? Anybody? Oh, man. Yes, thank you. So DJs used to use turntables that had records on them, right? And in the middle, there was a mixer. And on the mixer is a switch, a lever, that allows you to mix and blend from one turntable to the other. Yeah. So this is Ode to the Crossfader. Got this mix board itch, this bass line lifted from my father's dusty wax. 40 crates stacked in the back of the attic, this static in the headphones, hum in the blood, this deep bass buckshot thump in the chest. Got reasons and seasons pressed to both palms, 2 coins from each realm, this memory cross-faded and cued, these knuckles, nicks, and night sweat writes, this frantic abacus of scratch. Got blood in the crates, in the chest, in the dust, field hollers to break beats. My father's dusty wax, my father's dusty wax, my father's dust. Got reasons, got night sweats and hollers pressed to both palms, break beats and hollers pressed to both palms, static in the attic, stat crates of memory, dust, blood, and memory, cross-faded and baits, cross-faded and cued, cross-faded and static. Stacked hollers, got reasons in the dust, in the chest, got seasons in the blood, in the headphones, hum this deep bass buckshot, blood in both palms, my father's dust, pressed to both palms, got reasons and reasons and reasons and reasons and reasons. So, I'm gonna read a long poem. And then 2 shorter ones. They're still long, but not as long as the long poem I'm about to read. So 3 poems, 1 really long poem, and 2 kind of long poems. All right, and then we'll get to Q&A. So about 20 years ago now, wow, I was living in DC where I went to undergrad, and one night I'm walking down the street, and it's nighttime, like this. And this little bird comes, swoops down on me, and I duck, right? And it leaves, and it comes back, and keeps doing that. So I'm ducking, I'm batting it away. And what I notice is that when it's flying away from me, it's flying to where this car is. And the car, there was a bird that had his foot caught in the car door that was flapping against the car door. So the bird was actually trying to get me to come and help, yeah? But it's DC, it's nighttime, and I'm not about to go and pull somebody's car open, right? So I walked away, and I left the birds there. And I mean, I wouldn't have done that, right? Because that was dangerous, So, but it bothered me that I just left the birds there, and I didn't really have a place to kind of put that incident. I've been trying to write my way into it for years. It never happened until pretty recently. And what actually drove me back to that event was something I was reading about the jazz musician Eric Dolphy. If you guys don't know him, you got to check him out, right? One thing that was interesting about Eric Dolphy was that he transcribed bird calls, right? Because he said there was something pure, right, and exact in the birds' notes and rhythms. So he made an attempt to transcribe those. So when I read that, the poem kind of came from there. It has a bleeding title, and what that means is the title just bleeds into the first line. So I'll just read the title and start reading from there. And it's really long, so I think I might just get to one more of the other poems. Upon reading that Eric Dolphy transcribed even the calls of certain species of birds, I think first of two sparrows I met when walking home late night years ago in another city not unlike this. The one bird frantic, attacking, I thought, the way she swooped down, circled my head and flailed her wings in my face. How she seemed to scream each time I swung. How she dashed back and forth between me and a blood-red Corolla parked near the opposite curb. How, finally, I understood. I spied another bird, also calling, his foot inexplicably caught in the car's closed door, beating his whole bird body against it, trying, it appeared, to bang himself free. And who knows how long he'd been there, flailing. Who knows, he and the other I mistook at first for a bat. They called to me, something between squawk and chirp, something between song and prayer, to do something, anything. And like any good God, I disappeared. Not indifferent exactly, but with things to do, and most likely on my way home from another heartbreak. Call it 1997, and say I'm several thousand miles from home, by which I mean those were the days I made of everyone a love song. By which I mean I was lonely and unrequited. But that's not quite it either. Truth is, I did manage to find a few to love me, but couldn't always love them back. The Rasta law professor, the firefighter's wife, the burlesque dancer whose daughter blackened drawings with M's to mean the sky was full of birds the day her daddy died. I think his widow said he drowned one morning on a fishing trip. Anyway, I'm digressing. But if you ask that night, did I mention it was night? Why I didn't even try to jimmy the lock to spring the sparrow, I couldn't say truthfully that it had anything to do with envy, with wanting a woman to plead as deeply for me as these sparrows did, one for the other. No, I'd have said something instead about the neighborhood itself, the car thief shot a block and a half east the week before, or about the men I came across nights prior, sweat slicked and shirtless, grappling in the middle of the street, the larger one's chest pressed to the back of the smaller, bruised and bleeding both. I know you thought this was about birds, but stay with me. I left them both in the street, the same street where I'd leave the sparrows, the men embracing, and for all one knows, especially one not from around there, they could have been lovers. The one whispering an old, old tune into the ear of the other, baby, baby, don't leave me this way. I left the men where I'd leave the sparrows and their song. And as I walked away, I heard one of the men call to me, please, or help, or brother, or some such. and I didn't break stride. Not one bit. It's how I've learned to save myself. Let me try this another way. Call it 1977 and say I'm back west, South Central Los Angeles. My mother and father at it again, but this time in the street, broad daylight and all the neighbors watching. One, I think his name was Sonny, runs out from his duplex to pull my father off. You see where I'm going with this. My mother crying out, fragile as a sparrow. Sonny fighting my father, fragile as a sparrow. And me, years later, trying to get it all down. As much for you, I'm saying, as for me. Sonny catches a left, lies flat on his back, blood starting to pool, and his own wife wailing, my mother wailing, and traffic backed now half a block. Horns, whistles, and soon sirens. 1977, summer, and all the trees full of birds, hundreds, I swear. And since I'm the one writing it, I'll tell you they were crying. Which brings me back to Dolphy and his transcribing. The jazz man, I think, wanted only to get it down pure, to get it down exact. The animal racking itself against a car's steel door. The animals in the trees reporting. The animals we make of ourselves and one another. Flailing, failing. Stay with me now. Days after the dust up, my parents took me to the park. And in this park was a pond. And in this pond were birds. Not sparrows, but swans. And my father spread a blanket and brought from a basket some apples and a paring knife. Summertime. My mother wore sunglasses and long sleeves. My father, now sober, cursed himself for leaving the radio, but my mother forgave him and said as she caressed the back of his hand that we could just listen to the swans. And we listened, and I watched. Two birds coupling, one beating its wings as it mounted the other. Summer, 1977. I listened and watched. When my parents made love late into that night, I covered my ears in the next room, scanning the encyclopedia for swans. It meant nothing to me then, at least. But did you know the collective noun for swans is a lamentation? And is a lamentation not its own species of song? What a woman wails, punch drunk in the street, or what a widow might sing, learning her man was drowned by swans, a lamentation of them. Imagine the capsized boat, the panicked man struck about the eyes, nose, and mouth each time he comes up for air. Imagine the birds coasting away and the waters suddenly calm, either trumpet swans or mutes, the dead man's wife running for help, crying to any who'd listen, a lamentation, and a city busy saving itself. I'm digressing, sure, but did you know that to digress means to stray from the flock? When I left my parents' house, I never looked back, by which I mean I made like a god and disappeared. As when I left the sparrows and the copulating swans, as when someday I'll leave this city, it's every flailing, it's every animal song.
Great.
Thank you. So thank you guys for listening. I'm gonna end with one poem. Is that cool? Is that a good time? Okay. Try to end on a higher note, slightly. So this is being recorded, yeah? Okay, so I gotta watch what I say. This is a love poem to New York, I'll say that, yeah? And it's called Song. I know it's wrong to stare, but it's Tuesday. The express is going local, and this woman's thighs, cocoa buttered, crossed, and stacked to her chin, are the only beauty I think I'll see for the next 40 minutes. Not the train's muttering junkie who pauses a little too long in front of me, dozing but never losing balance. Not the rat we notice scurry past the closing doors, terrorizing the rush hour platform. Not even these 5 old black men harmonizing about begging in pride, about a woman who won't come home, but skin, refracted light, and the hymn's hard mysteries. I imagine a man somewhere in this city working up the nerve to beg this woman home, the sweet reconciliation of sweat on sweat and pride, not even afterthought. My own woman, who I've begged sometimes not to leave and begged sometimes please to leave, never has, also waits, uptown in a 4th floor walk-up in an old t-shirt for me to make it back. She waits for me to come through jungles, over rivers, out from underground. She waits without fear, knowing no matter what, I will make it home. And God, there were times I probably shouldn't have, but did, and lived to see this day, the junkies, the rats, the thighs, and I say, praise it all. Even this ride. It's every bump and stall, and each funky body pressed to another, sweat earned over hours, bent over moats, caged in cubicles, and after it all, the pouring of us like scotch into daylight. Dusk, rush hour, this long trip home, praise it all. The dead miss out on summer. The sun bouncing off moving trains, and a woman to love you when you get inside. Somewhere in this city, a man will plead for love gone, another chance, and think himself miserable. He'll know somewhere deep he may never win her back, but he'll know even deeper that there's a kind of beauty in the begging itself, that all songs are love songs, blues especially. Praise the knowledge, praise the opening and closing doors, the ascent into light, heat, each sidewalk square, cracks and all, the 112 stairs between lobby and my woman's front door, the exact moment I let in this city, let out this sweat, and come to own this mighty, mighty joy. Thank you. So, something I didn't mention earlier was that Ethan said that whoever asked the first question, he'll give $5 to. So,
It's true.
really? Oh, wow. So, yeah, we'll have time for a few questions. Yes.
Hello, thank you for being brave. And I was curious as to the likeness or the parallel of O.G. Robert Caldwell to
Sure.
Ogun.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so Ogun is the Orisha who is associated with iron, right? He's a blacksmith, right? The story is, as an iron worker, he was in charge of all the implements, the hunting, the farm implements, right? He comes down this road, and these people are there just having a good time, just laughing. He thinks they're laughing at him. There are many stories, they're called parakis, right? This is one. And in a rage, he chops off everybody's head, right? And because he did that, he got banished from the village, right? So he goes, and when he leaves, all the iron implements go with him. So people starving. They can't hunt, they can't farm, they can't do anything. No one can bring him back. Every time they send somebody to go talk him back into coming to the village, they get beheaded. Yeah. So they send Oshun. Oshun is the Orisha most closely associated with the river. She represents sensuality, laughter, love, all those things, right? So she goes, again, she's in the river, she's bathing, right, dancing. He's looking through the foliage, she sees her. She knows he's there, but he don't know that she knows that he knows she's there, right? So he comes closer, she's dancing, she comes closer. When he gets close enough, she dips her fingers into a jar of honey and puts on his lips, and he's like, oh snap. So then he follows her back, and she's dancing back to the village, and that's how tools and stuff came back. The guy in the poem, Robert Caldwell, which is, they share the same initials of the actual man, but I didn't want to put his actual name in the poem. He was someone I met when I used to be a forklift operator in a warehouse. And he had just gotten out. He was 46 years old at the time, which I thought was old. You guys probably still think it's old. It's not old, just so you know. But he had just gotten out. He had been in since he was 20-something. He had spent over 25 years of his life in prison. And he became a good friend of mine. He was my first mentor in terms of weightlifting. And he was all about the iron, right? And he shared a few of the characteristics that Ogun did. He was not the most social person, but a warrior, yeah? So once I was able to make that connection, the poem was easier to write.
Well, I want to say that's profound because I remember there was a visual artist who was teaching us to use that work of like Robert Farris Thompson within our writing. And he was always talking about the dialectic. And I noticed that with quite a few of your poems that you take this profound symbiosis of memory with the inspiration of now and create this epic creation in the dialectic, but a living dialectic, just like the Orishas and the Egyptian symbols.
Sure.
So I just think that's profound to be able to witness that.
Oh,
you know?
thank you.
Thank you for being great to share it with us.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. She had a question too.
Lily, do you have a question?
No? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Yes.
So, John, how do you feel the experience of being into rap? I mean, you did that wonderful poem where you can really see the rap influence on the subject matter. But are there ways in which poems that aren't necessarily about rap and the music show, in your mind, the influence of those years of studying?
Absolutely. There's a poet we lost recently named Geoffrey Hill, an English poet. And some consider him, when he was living, to be the greatest living writer in the UK. Yeah. Now, I was reading or watching an interview with him on YouTube, and one of the questions was, do you consider rap poetry? He gave an honest answer. He said, from what I've heard, no. But he said, whoever the Shakespeare of this generation is, they would do well to learn something from the rappers. So I was thinking about that, and I was like, yeah, that's true, right? There's so much to learn. So I went back and started thinking about what were the things that I carried over. And mostly it has to do with my ear, right? When it's done well, rap is poetry, yeah? There's everything. I could teach a whole poetry class using nothing but rappers, good rappers. Right? And there's alliteration, there's rhyme, there's meter, there's metaphor, there's simile, there's narrative progression, all those things, right? There's control, there's so many things you can learn. So when I came to poetry, I had all that. The other thing is I guess, an urge to witness, right? The rappers who I loved the most when I was coming up were, one, storytellers, and I'm very much a narrative poet, right? And storytellers who were talking about the conditions that they saw in their daily lives. Melly Mel, Chuck D, KRS One, people like that. So, and it's hard because I teach poetry now, right? So I have a lot of students who are really into, maybe some abstract or experimental things, and I have to honor that, right? And not try to push my aesthetic on too much. But the poetry that I'm drawn to is poetry that's grounded and rooted in the everyday. And I think I got that from my early experience with rap. I need a student from this section over here to ask a question. Otherwise, you guys all get Fs. Huh?
Trying to formulate a good one.
Yes, right here.
I'm both, but I'm a student. I just wondered, like, the commercialization of rap,
Sure.
how is it altered it? And, like, there's online now, so people can, like, try to do their own thing, but as far as making a living and like, the mass media kind of control messages.
Sure. Back in the day, Chuck D, who's the lead rapper, Public Enemy, he said, rap is black people seeing it. Where are you going? Where are you going? Just joking, go see. I'm sorry, I could not do that. But they got the food, that's right, that's right. Chuck, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So Chuck D once said that rap is black people's CNN, right? Meaning that a group from Compton could make a record and that broadcast all the way to the Bronx, and people get an idea of how life is like on the other side of the country, right? An individual from the Bronx could broadcast a message, kind of like drums being played over the hills, right, into Chicago. And we start to communicate that way. I think there was something really, poignant in that. And I feel like it is and can be used as that as well, right? But capitalism being what it is, commercialization being what it is, right? It was really easy for a lot of the soul to get sucked out of hip hop. I was telling a group earlier today that I think true hip-hop is still shared the way that it was back in the day. When hip-hop was first in its inception, it didn't get played on the radio, on mainstream radio, right? There may be a few pockets, college radio stations, right? Word of mouth is how a lot of it got around. But there wasn't a lot of huge commercial success, right? Rap has turned into pop music, right? Sung by people with brown faces, but it's still pop music. Hip hop, right, is still something that you access, I guess one would say through the underground, right? So in some ways, the internet, the advent of technology has actually made it more accessible. But there are a lot of good people out there doing really positive things. They're just not getting, a lot of the shine. But the thing is, one could say that the true artists never were getting a lot of that shine. Yes. Oh, back here, and then I know you've been thinking about it for a while. Yes.
I was just wondering, when you're writing, especially following the crossfade one, do you hear it? Like, do you hear the way you would speak it as you're writing?
Yes. Yes. Lawrence Ferlinghetti once said that the printing press ruined poetry, right? And what I think he meant by that was poetry originally was an oral art form, right? When people started writing for the page, I think they lost a lot of the music in poetry, a lot of the song. Right? So when I write, I want that to exist, right? Even if it's not really overt and end rhyme and all that stuff, right? I still want it to kind of touch the ear in a certain way. So I do exercises, I do drills, I practice that. And when I write, I'll read it back to myself aloud, right? And my ear can tell me when a line is off, right, at this point. So I absolutely pay attention to sound and music. Yes.
So you write a lot of poems, but what inspired you to write Trigger? That kind of seems out of left field.
The play?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a friend that I did some collaborations with. He was a choreographer, and this is like our third collaboration. And I think I'm probably a better playwright than I am a poet, even though I haven't written as many plays as I have poems. And when he came to me with the idea, it was pretty much set out like, I want you to write the text for this production about this, go, right? And so you kind of gave me, some very loose parameters, and I kind of went from there. And again, it was out of that same impulse. And some of the poems are actually built off of things that are in the book. So it's continuing that same mission to speak to certain realities.
Time for one more, maybe?
All right, one more, and then snack time. No? All right. Oh, here we go. Yes, Trinity Soccer.
Favorite topic you like to write about in poems?
Favorite topic I like to write about? No, there's a topic that I keep coming back to. That's a great question. All these questions are great, by the way. I write a lot about my upbringing. Yeah. Did you just give her a pound for the question? Nice. I write a lot about my experience with my parents. Yeah. And I thought I had exercised all that in the first book, right? When you apply for certain fellowships and grants, they always want to ask, what's your next project? What are you going to write about? And whatever I say that I'm going to write about, I never have. I've always really grand schemes. I'm going to write about my world travels and write about, I'll keep writing about my father and my mother. And it's not that they're my favorite topics, right? It's just something that I just still have to process, yeah. Thank you guys very much.